All right, we are coming up on 8 o'clock. So, let's settle in, get comfortable, and get back where we left off. Welcome back. This is our third night of reading from William Faulkner's As I Lay Dying. And, as we've found so far, this is intermixed with bits of dark irony, grief, sadness, and depression, and a growing dislike for this entire family. I'm really starting to think that just about all of them have a couple screws loose, and have their own very special place set aside for them in hell, because I'm starting to find that I don't like any of them. In their own very special way, of course. And all this combined with the actual good neighbors that they find around them that are ever suffering. Somehow, the neighbors are doing their best to try and keep these people from being their own worst enemies. And despite that, not only is the family hanging their dirty laundry out to dry, they're bringing their decaying, rotting mother along for the ride. Yeah, let's not forget, they're actually dragging a homemade coffin with some holes in it, with a rather off body along the ride as they traipse through the countryside to where she made sure to let everyone know before she went that that's where she wanted to be put to rest. No embalming, no preservation, just stuffing Mom in a wooden box in her old wedding dress and thinking, yeah, this'll be fine. The buzzards think it's fine as they circle round and round. So, let's go ahead and continue this cavalcade of atrocious behaviors. Oh, hello again, Streamaload Spot. It's been a couple days. Alright, let's jump back in and we'll see what other problems this family can drag into the light. I remembered to switch to the other view this time. Alright, so we're starting up from about halfway through. We've got probably 2 nights left of reading. And we're starting off from Darrell, the one they call the thinker. He's stuck in his own head and always having something going on. Whether he's too good for the family, too good for the country life, or just keeps to himself is up for discussion. So, about halfway, it would be nice if there were numbers on these chapters, but we'll survive. About halfway through As I Lay Dying now, from Darrell. Before us, the thick, dark current runs. It talks up to us in a murmur, becomes ceaseless and myriad. The yellow surface dimpled monstrously into fading swirls traveling along the surface for an instant, silent, impermanent, and profoundly significant. As though, just beneath the surface, something huge and alive waked for a moment of lazy alertness out of and into light slumber again. It clucks and murmurs among the spokes and about the mule's knees, yellow scummed with flotsam and with thick soiled gouts of foam, as though it had sweat lathering like a driven horse. Through the undergrowth, it goes with a plaintive sound, a musing sound. In it, the unwinded cane and saplings lean as before a little gale. swaying without reflections, as though suspended on invisible wires from the branches overhead. Above this ceaseless surface they stand, trees, cane, vines, rootless, severed from the earth, spectral, above a scene of immense yet circumscribed desolation, filled with the voice of the waste and mournful water. Cash and I sit in the wagon. Jewel sits the horse at the off rear wheel. The horse is trembling, its eye rolling wild and baby blue in its long pink face, its breathing stertorous, like groaning. He sits erect, poised, looking quietly and steadily and quickly this way and that. His face calm, a little pale, alert. Cash's face is also gravely composed. He and I look at one another with long, probing looks that plunge unimpeded through one another's eyes and into the ultimate secret place where, for an instant, Cash and Darl crouch flagrant and unabashed in all the old terror and the old foreboding, alert and secret and without shame. When we speak, our voices are quiet, detached. I reckon we'll see you in the road, all right. Toll taken and cut them 2 big white oaks. I heard tell how at high water in the old days they used to line up the ford by them trees. I reckon he did that 2 years ago when he was logging down there. I reckon he never thought that anybody would ever use this ford again. I reckon not. Yes, it must have been then. He cut a side of timber out in there here then. Paid off that mortgage with it, I hear tell. Yes, I reckon so. I reckon Vernon could have done that. That's a fact. Most folks that logs in this here country, they need a darn good farm to support the sawmill, or maybe a store. But I reckon Vernon could. I reckon so. He's a sight. Vernon is. Yes, it must still be here. He never would have got that timber out of here if he hadn't cleaned out that old road. I reckon we're still on it. He looks about quietly at the position of the trees, leaning this way and that, looking back along the floorless road shaped vaguely high in air by the position of the lopped and felled trees, as if the road too had been soaked free of earth and floated upward, to leave in its spectral tracing a monument to a still more profound desolation than this above which we now sit, talking quietly of old security and old trivial things. Jewel looks at him, then at me. Then his face turns in that quiet, constant questing about the scene, the horse trembling quietly and steadily between his knees. He could go on ahead slow and sort of feel it out, I say. Yeah, Cash says, not looking at me. His face is in profile as he looks forward where Jewel has moved on ahead. He can't miss the river, I say. He couldn't miss seeing it 50 yards ahead. Cash does not look at me. His face in profile. If I'd just suspicioned it, I could have come down last week and taken a sight on it. The bridge was up then, I say. It does not look at me. Whitfield crossed it a horseback. Jewel looks at us again. His expression sober and alert and subdued. His voice is quiet. What do you want me to do? I ought to come down last week and taken a sight on it, Cash says. We couldn't have known, I say. There wasn't any way for us to know. I'll ride on ahead, Jewel says. You can follow where I am. He lifts the horse. It shrinks, bowed. He leans to it, speaking to it, lifting it forward almost bodily. It setting its feet down with gingerly splashings, trembling, breathing harshly. He speaks to it, murmurs to it. Go on, he says. I ain't going to let nothing hurt you. Go on now. Jewel, Cash says. Jewel does not look back. He lifts the horse on. He can swim, I say, if he'll just get the horse time and give the horse time anyhow. When he was born, he had a bad time of it. Ma would sit in the lamplight, holding him on a pillow on her lap. We would wake and find her so. There would be no sound from them. That pillow was longer than him, Cash says. He's leaning a little forward. I ought to come down last week and sight him. I ought to done it. That's right, I say. Neither his feet nor his head would reach the end of it. You couldn't have known, I say. I ought to done it, he says. He lifts the reins. The mules move into the traces. The wheels murmur alive in the water. He looks back down at Addie. It ain't on a balance. It ain't on a balance, he says. At last, the trees open. Against the open river, Jewel sits the horse. Half turned, it belly deep now. Across the river, we can see Vernon and Pa and Vardaman and Dewey Dell. Vernon is waving at us, waving us further downstream. We're too high up, Cash says. Vernon's shouting too, but we cannot make out what he says for the noise of the water. It runs steady and deep now, unbroken, without sense of motion until a log comes along, turning slowly. Watch it, Cash says. We watch it and see it falter and hang for a moment. Current building up behind it in a thick wave, submerging it for an instant, before it shoots up and tumbles on. There it is, I say. Ha, Cash says. He's there. We look at Vernon again. He is now flapping his arms up and down. We move on downstream, slowly and carefully, watching Vernon. He drops his hands. Just the place, Cash says. Well, goddammit, let's get across then, Jewel says. He moves the horse on. You wait, Cash says. Jewel stops again. Well, by God, he says. Cash looks at the water. Then he looks back at Addie. It ain't on a balance. Well, it ain't on a balance. Then you go back to the goddamn bridge and walk across, Jewel says. You and Doll both. Let me on that wagon. Cash does not pay him any attention. It ain't on a balance, he says. Yes, sir, we gotta watch it. Watch it? Hell, Jewel says. You get out of that wagon and let me have it. By God, if you're afraid to drive it over. His eyes are pale as two bleached chips in his face. Cash is looking at him. We'll get it over, he says. I tell you what to do. You ride on back and walk across the bridge. And come down the other bank. Meet us with the rope. Vernon will take your horse home with him. And keep it till we get back. You go to hell, Jewel says. You take the rope and come down the bank and be ready with it, Cash says. 3 can't do no more than 2 can. 1 to drive, 1 to steady it. God damn you, Jewel says. Let Jewel take the end of the rope and cross upstream. Upstream of us and brace it, I say. Will you do that, Jewel? Jewel watches me. Hard. He looks quick at Cash. Hi, Zoe. He looks quick at Cash, then back at me. His eyes alert and hard. I don't give a damn. Just so we do something. Sitting here not lifting a goddamn hand. Let's do that, Cash, I say. I reckon we'll have to, Cash says. The river itself is not 100 yards across. And Pa and Vernon and Vardaman and Dewey Dell are the only things in sight, not of that single monotony of desolation, leaning with that terrific quality a little from right to left, as though we had reached the place where the motion of the wasted world accelerates just before the final precipice. Yet they appear dwarfed. It is as though the space between us were time, an irrevocable quality. It is as though time, no longer running straight before us in a diminishing line, now runs parallel between us like a looping string, the distance being the doubling accretion of the thread and not the interval between. The mules stand, their forequarters already sloped a little, their rumps high. They too are breathing now with a deep groaning sound. Looking back once, their gaze sweeps across us, with in their eyes a wild, sad, profound, and despairing quality, as though they had already seen in the thick water the shape of the disaster which they could not speak and we could not see. Cash turns back into the wagon. He lays his hands flat on Addie, rocking her a little. His face is calm, downsloped, calculent, concerned. He lifts his box of tools and wedges it forward under the seat. Together we shove Addie forward, wedging her between the tools and the wagon bed. Then he looks at me. No, I say, I reckon I'll stay. Might take both of us. From the toolbox, he takes his coiled rope and carries the end twice around the seat stanchion and passes the end to me without tying it. The other end he pays out to Jewel, who takes a turn about his saddle horn. He must force the horse down into the current. It moves, high-kneed, arch-necked, boring, and chafing. Jewel sits slightly forward, his knees lifted a little. Again his swift, alert, calm gaze sweeps upon us and on. He lowers the horse into the stream, speaking to it in a soothing murmur. The horse slips, goes under to the saddle, surges to its feet again, the current building up against Jewel's thighs. Watch yourself, Cash says. I'm on it now, Jewel says. You can come ahead now. Cash takes the reins and lowers the team carefully and skillfully into the stream. I felt the current take us, and I knew we were on the ford by that reason, since it was only by means of that slipping contact that we could tell that we were in motion at all. What had once been a flat surface was now a succession of troughs and hillocks, lifting and falling about us, shoving at us, teasing at us with light, lazy touches in the vain instance of solidarity underfoot. Cash looked back at me, and then I knew that we were gone, but I did not realize the reason for the rope until I saw the log. It surged up out of the water and stood for an instant upright upon that surging and heaving desolation like Christ. Get out and let the current take you down to the bend, Cash said. You can make it all right. No, I said. I'd get just as wet that way as this. The log appears suddenly between two hills, as if it had rocketed suddenly from the bottom of the river. Upon the end of it, a long gout of foam hangs like the beard of an old man, or a goat. When Cash speaks to me, I know that he has been watching it all the time, watching it, and watching Jewel 10 feet ahead of us. Let the rope go, he says. With his other hand, he reaches down and reaves the 2 turns from the stanchion. Right on, Jewel, he says. See if you can pull us ahead of the log. Jewel shouts at the horse. Again, he appears to lift it bodily between his knees. He's just above the top of the ford, and the horse has a purchase of some sort, for it surges forward, shining wetly half out of water, crashing on in a succession of lunges. It moves unbelievably fast. By that token, Jewel realizes at last that the rope is free, for I can see him sawing back on the reins, his head turned as the log rears in a long, sluggish lunge between us, bearing down upon the team. They see it too. For a moment, they also shine black out of the water. Then the downstream one vanishes, dragging the other with him. The wagon shears crosswise, poised on the crest of the ford as the log strikes it, tilting it up and on. Cash is half turned, the reins running taut from his hand and disappearing into the water. The other hand reached back upon Addie, holding her jammed over against the high side of the wagon. Jump clear, he says quietly. Stay away from the team and don't try to fight it. It'll swing you into the bend all right. You come too, I say. Vernon and Vardaman are running along the bank. Pa and Dewey Dell stand watching us. Dewey Dell with the basket and the package in her arms. Jewel is trying to fight the horse back. The head of one mule peers, its eyes wide. It looks back at us for an instant, making a sound almost human. The head vanishes again. Back, Jewel! Cash shouts, back, Jewel! For another instant, I can see him leaning to the tilting wagon, his arm braced back against Addie and his tools. I see the bearded head of the rearing log strike up again, and beyond it, Jewel holding the horse upreared, its head wrenched around, hammering its head with his fist. I jump from the wagon on the downstream side. Pulling between 2 hills, I see the mules once more. They roll up out of the water in succession, turning completely over, their legs stiffly extended as when they lost contact with the earth. That's the end of that chapter there, and things went predictably, horribly, horribly wrong. I'm glad we didn't try and get that chapter in before we stopped last time, because that would have been a terrible, terrible place to stop. All right, so we've got a quick perspective from Vardaman, the boy. Yeah, it's watching the horse guy be the voice of reason is like, but half the time he's also like actively against the reason. So it's like, it's hard to tell if he's just accidentally right sometime, or I don't know. All right, Vardaman. Cash tried, but she fell off, and Darl jumped, going under. He went under, and Cash hollering to catch her, and I holler, running and hollering, and Dewey Dell hollering at me. Vardaman, you Vardaman, you Vardaman, and Vernon passed me because he was seeing her come up, and she jumped into the water again, and Darl hadn't caught her yet. Oh, I forgot. Vardaman doesn't know what a comma is. Oh, boy. He came up to see, and I holler and catch her, Darl, catch her, and he didn't come back because she was too heavy, and he had to go on catch her at her, and I holler and catch her, Darl, because in the water she could go faster than a man, and Darl had to gravel for her, so I knew he could catch her because he is the best grappler, even with the mules in the way again. They dived up, rolling their feet stiff, rolling down again, and their backs up now, and Darl had to again, because in the water she could go faster than a man or a woman, and I passed Vernon, and he wouldn't get in the water and help Darl. He would grapple for her with Darl, and he knew, but he wouldn't help. The mules dived up again, diving, their legs stiff, rolling slow, and then Darl again, and I hollered, catch her, Darl, catch her head, head her into the bank, Darl, and Vernon wouldn't help. And then Darl dodged past the mules where he could. He had her under the water, coming into the bank, coming in slow, because in the water, she fought to stay under the water, but Darl was strong, and he was coming in slow, and so I knew he had her, because he came slow. And I ran down into the water to help, and I couldn't stop hollering because Darl was strong and steady, holding her under the water. Even if she did fight, he would not let her go. He was seeing me, and he would hold her, and it was all right now. It was all right. Now it was all right. Then he comes up out of the water. He comes a long way up slow for his hands, but he's got to have her, so I can bear it. His hands come up, and all of him above the water. I can't stop. I have no time. Not got time to try. I will try to when I can, but his hands came empty out of the water. Emptying away. Where is Ma, Darl? I said, you never got her. You know she is a fish, but you let her get away. You never got her, Darl. I began to run along the bank, watching the mules dive up slow again, then down again. Whew. Okay, so that was a chapter. So that is, again, it's always hard dealing with how children interact with events and deal with problems and loss in general. And Faulkner does a great job of it. Like, that feels like a kid. There's bits of hope, there's bits of despair coming through, there's bits of confusion, all through with a sense of just nothing stops. Just sudden, constant stream of consciousness. So, as bad as it is to read that out, Faulkner does a really stupendous job of having the glimpse into the child's mind, even if it hurts. All right, who was Tull again? Oh, Vernon Tull, the neighbor. Yeah. All right. So now we do probably have a solid voice of reason, because the neighbor seems to have it pretty well together. even if he doesn't really want to, because God help him, he's trying. All right, tall. When I told Cora how Doll jumped out of the wagon, and left Cash sitting there trying to save it, and the wagon turning over, and Jewel that was almost to the bank fighting that horse back where it had more sense than to go, she says, "And you're one of the folks that says Doll's the queer one, the one that ain't bright, and him the only one of them that had sense enough to get off that wagon. I noticed Ants was too smart to bid on it at all." "He couldn't have done no good if he'd been there," I said. "They was going about it right, and they would have made it if it hadn't been for that log." "Log? Fiddlesticks," Cora said. "It was the hand of God." "How can you say it was foolish?" I said. "Nobody can't guard against the hand of God. It would be sacrilege to try to." "Then why dare it?" Cora says. "Tell me that." "Ants didn't," I said. "That's just what you faulted him for." "His place was there," Cora said. "If he had been a man, he would have been there, instead of making his sons do what he dursn't." "I don't know what you want then," I said. "One breath you say he was daring the hand of God to try it, and the next breath you jump on Ants because he wasn't with him." Then she begun to sing again, working at the washtub, with that singing look on her face. And she done give up on folks and all that foolishness, and then done went on ahead of them, marching up the sky singing. The wagon hung for a long time while the current built up under it, shoving it off the forward, and Cash leaning more and more, trying to keep the coffin braced so it wouldn't slip down and finish tilting the wagon over. As soon as the wagon got tilted good to where the current could finish it, the log went on. It headed around the wagon and went on good as a swimming man could have done. It was like it had been sent there to do a job, and done it and went on. When the mules finally kicked loose, it looked for a minute like maybe Cash would get the wagon back. It looked like him and the wagon wasn't moving at all, and just Jewel fighting that horse back to the wagon. Then that boy passed me, running and hollering at Darla and the gal trying to catch him. And then I see the mules come rolling slow up out of the water, the legs spraddled stiff like they balked upside down, and roll on into the water again. Then the wagon tilted over, and it and Jewel and the horse were all mixed up together. Cash went out inside, still holding the coffin braced, and I couldn't tell anything for the horse lunging and splashing. I thought that Cash had give up then and was swimming for it, and I was yelling at Jewel to come on back, and then all of a sudden him and the horse went under too, and I thought they was all going. I knew the horse had got dragged off the forward too. With that wild drowning horse and that wagon and that loose box, it was going to be pretty bad. There I was, standing knee deep in the water, yelling at Ants behind me, "See what you done now? See what you done now?" The horse come up again. It was headed for the bank now, throwing its head up, and then I saw one of them holding to the saddle on the downstream side. So I started running along the bank, trying to catch sight of Cash, because he couldn't swim, yelling at Jewel where Cash was like a darn fool. Bet as that boy that was on down bank still hollering at Darl. So I went down in the water, so I could still keep some kind of grip in the mud. When I saw Jewel, he was middle deep, so I knew he was on the forward anyway, leaning hard upstream. Then I see the rope, and I see the water building up where he was holding the wagon snubbed just below the forward. So it was Cash, holding to the horse when it came splashing and scrambling up the bank, moaning and groaning like a natural man. When I come to it, it was just kicking Cash loose from his hold on the saddle. His face turned up a second when he was sliding back into the water. It was gray with his eyes closed and a long swipe of mud across his face. Then he let go, turned over in the water. He looked just like an old bundle of clothes kind of washing up and down against the bank. It looked like he was laying there in the water on his face, rocking up and down a little, looking at something on the bottom. We could watch the rope cutting down into the water. We could feel the weight of the wagon kind of bump and lunge lazy-like. Just as soon as not, and that rope cutting down into the water hard as an iron bar. We could hear the water hissing on it like it was red hot, like it was a straight iron bar stuck into the bottom and us holding the end of it, and the wagon lazing up and down, kind of pushing and prodding at us like it had come around and got behind us, lazy-like. Like it just as soon as not, when it made up its mind, there was a shoat come by, blowed up like a balloon. One of them spotted shoats of long quicks. It bumped against the rope like it was an iron bar, and it bumped off and went on. And us watching that rope slanting down into the water, we watched it. Well, he is the rather much the lone spot of sensibility with this whole circus. But even he can't really do much when, the wagon goes over the ford. That's, if there's anything I learned from Oregon Trail, it was, don't ford. It never goes well. Just don't do it. But apparently, that's too much modern knowledge for this crew. So let's see what Darl has to say about this. Cash lies on his back on the earth, his head raised on a rolled garment. His eyes are closed, his face is gray, his hair plastered in a smooth smear across his forehead, as though done with a paintbrush. His face appears sunken a little, sagging from the bony ridges of eye sockets, nose, gums, as though the wetting had slacked the firmness which had held the skin full. His teeth, set in pale gums, are parted a little, as if he had been laughing quietly. He lies pole thin in his wet clothes. A little pool of vomit at his head, and a thread of it running from the corner of his mouth and down his cheek, where he couldn't turn his head quick or far enough, until Dewey Dell stoops and wipes it away with the hem of her dress. Hang on. Another of those damn nosebleeds from being too damn dry. Hang on. Yeah, I may have to fish out the old humidifier, and we'll see if it does anything. But it is just that time of year. We're gonna have to deal with it. Half a nose is good enough to read, right? All right, where were we? All right. Jewel approaches. He has the plane. Vernon just found the square, he says. He looks down at Cash, dripping too. Ain't he talked none yet? He had a saw and hammer and chalk line and rule, I say. I know that. Jewel lays the square down. Pa watches him. It can't be far away, Pa says. It all went together. Was there such misfortunate man? Jewel does not look at Pa. You better call Vardaman back here, he says. He looks at Cash. He turns and goes away. Get him to talk as soon as he can, he says, so he can tell us what else there was. We return to the river. The wagon is hauled clear, the wheels chalked carefully. We all helped. It is as though upon the shabby, familiar, inert shape of the wagon there lingered somehow latent, yet still immediate, that violence which has slain the mules that drew it, not an hour since. Above the edge of the flood, in the wagon bed, it lies profoundly, the long, pale planks hushed a little with wetting, yet still yellow, like gold seen through water, save for two long, muddy smears. We pass it and go on to the bank. One end of the rope is made fast to a tree. At the edge of the stream, knee-deep, Vardaman stands, bent forward a little, watching Vernon with rapt absorption. He has stopped yelling, and he is wet to the armpits. Vernon is at the other end of the rope, shoulder deep in the river, looking back at Vardaman. Farther back than that, he says. You get back by the tree and hold the rope for me, so we can't slip. Vardaman backs along the rope to the tree, moving blindly, watching Vernon. When we come up, he looks at us once, his eyes round and a little dazed. Then he looks at Vernon again, in that posture of rapt alertness. I got the hammer too, Vernon says. Looks like we ought to be done already. Got that chalk line. It ought to floated. Float clean away, Jewel says. We won't get it. We ought to find the saw, though. I reckon so. Vernon says. He looks at the water. That choke line, too. What else did he give? He ain't talked yet, Jewel says, entering the water. He looks back at me. You go back and get him roused up to talk, he says. Pa's there, I say. I follow Jewel into the water, along the rope. It feels alive in my hand, bellied faintly in a prolonged and resonant arc. Vernon is watching me. You better go, he says. You better be there. Let's see what else we can get before it washes on down, I say. We hold to the rope, the current curling and dimpling about our shoulders. But beneath that false blandness, the true force of it leans against us lazily. I had not thought that water in July could be so cold. It's like hands molding and prodding at the very bones. Vernon is still looking back toward the bank. Reckon it'll hold us all, he says. We too look back, following the rigid bar of the rope as it rises from the water to the tree, and Vardaman crouched a little beside it, watching us. Wish Mom Mule wouldn't strike out for home, Vernon says. Come on, Jewel says. Let's get out in here. We submerge in turn, holding to the rope, being clutched by one another while the cold wall of the water sucks the slanting mud backward and upstream from beneath our feet. And we are suspended so, groping along the cold bottom. Even the mud there is not still. It is a chill, scouring quality, as though the earth under us were in motion too. We touch and fumble at one another's extended arms, letting ourselves go cautiously against the rope, or, erect in turn, watch the water suck and boil, where one of the other two gropes beneath the surface. Paws come down to the shore, watching us. Vernon comes up, streaming, his face sloped down into his pursed, blowing mouth. His mouth is bluish, like a circle of weathered rubber. He has the rule. He'll be glad of that, I say. It's right new. He bought it just last month out of the catalog. If we just knowed for sure what else, Vernon says, looking over his shoulder and then turning to face where Jewel had disappeared. Didn't he go down for me? Vernon says. I don't know, I say. I think so. Yes, he did. We watch the thick curling surface, streaming away from us in slow whirls. Give him a pull on the rope, Vernon says. He's on your end of it, I say. Ain't nobody on my end of it, he says. Pull it in, I say, but he's already done that, holding the end above the water. And then we see Jewel. He's 10 yards away. He comes up, blowing, and looks at us, tossing his long hair back with a jerk of his head. Then he looks toward the bank. We can see him filling his lungs. Jewel, Vernon says, not loud, but his voice going full and clear along the water, peremptory yet tactful. It'll be back here. Better come back. Jewel dives again. We stand there, leaning back against the current, watching the water where he disappeared, holding the dead rope between us like two men holding the nozzle of a fire hose, waiting for the water. Suddenly, Dewey Dell is behind us in the water. You make him come back, she says. Jewel, she says. He comes up again, tossing his hair back from his eyes. He is swimming now, toward the bank, the current sweeping him downstream, quartering. You, Jewel, Dewey Dale says. We stand holding the rope and see him gain the bank and climb out. As he rises from the water, he stoops and picks up something. He comes back along the bank. He's found the chalk line. He comes opposite us and stands there, looking about as if he were seeking something. Pa goes on down the bank. He's going back to look at the mules again, where their round bodies float and rub quietly together in the slack water within the bend. What did you do with the hammer, Vernon? Jewel says. I give it to him, Vernon says, jerking his head at Vardaman. Vardaman is looking after Pa. Then he looks at Jewel. With a square. Vernon is watching Jewel. He moves toward the bank, passing Dewey Dell and me. You get on out of here, I said. She says nothing, looking at Jewel and Vernon. Where's the hammer? Jewel says. Vardaman scuttles up the bank and fetches it. It's heavier than the saw, Vernon says. Jewel is tying the end of the chalk line about the hammer shaft. Hammer's got the most wood in it, Jewel says. He and Vernon face one another, watching Jewel's hands. You're flatter, too, Vernon says. It'd float 3-to-1 almost. Try the plane. Jewel looks at Vernon. Vernon is tall. Tall, too. Long and lean. Eye to eye, they stand in their close, wet clothes. Lon Quick could look even at a cloudy sky and tell the time to 10 minutes. Big Lon, I mean, not little Lon. Why don't you get out of the water, I say. It won't float like a saw, Jewel says. It'll float nigher to a saw than a hammer will, Jewel says. Bet you, Jewel says. I won't bet, Vernon says. They stand there, watching Jewel's still hands. Hell, Jewel says. Get the plane then. So they get the plane and tie it to the chalk line and enter the water again. Pa comes back along the bank. He stops for a while and looks at us, hunched, mournful like a failing steer or an old, tall bird. Vernon and Jewel return, leaning against the current. Get out of the way, Jewel says to Dewey Dell. Get out of the water. She crowds against me a little so they can pass. Jewel holding the plane high as though it were perishable, the blue string trailing back over his shoulder. They pass us and stop. They fall to arguing quietly about just where the wagon went over. Dar ought to know, Vernon says. They look at me. I don't know, I says. I wasn't there that long. Hell, Jewel says. They move on, gingerly leaning against the current, reading the ford with their feet. Have you got a hold to the rope? Vernon says. Jewel does not answer. He glances back at the shore, calculant, then at the water. He flings the plane outward, letting the string run through his fingers turning blue where it runs over them. When the line stops, he hands it back to Vernon. Better let me go this time, Vernon says. Again, Jewel does not answer. We watch him duck beneath the surface. Jewel! Dewey Dell whimpers. It ain't so deep there, Vernon says. He does not look back. He is watching the water where Jewel went under. When Jewel comes up, he has the saw. When we pass the wagon, Pa is standing beside it, scrubbing at the 2 mud smears with a handful of leaves. Against the jungle, Jewel's horse looks like a patchwork quilt hung on a line. Cash has not moved. We stand above him, holding the plane, the saw, the hammer, the square, the rule, the chalk line, while Dewey Dell squats and lifts Cash's head. Cash, she says. Cash! He opens his eyes, staring profoundly up at our inverted faces. It was ever, if ever, such a misfortunate man, Pa says. Look, Cash, we say, holding the tools up so he can see. What else did you have? He tries to speak, rolling his head, shutting his eyes. Cash, we say. Cash! It is to vomit that he is turning his head. Dewey Dell wipes his mouth on the wet hem of her dress. Then he can speak. It's his saucehead, Jewel says. The new one he bought, when he bought the rule. He moves, turning away. Vernon looks up after him, still squatting. Then he rises and follows Jewel down to the water. If ever was such a misfortunate man, Pa says. He looms tall above us as we squat. He looks like a figure carved clumsily from tough wood by a drunken caricaturist. It's a trial, he says, but I don't begrudge her it. No man can say I begrudge her it. Dewey Dell has laid Cash's head back on the folded coat, twisting his head a little to avoid the vomit. Beside him his tools lie. A fellow might call it lucky. It was the same leg he broke when he fell off in that church, Pa says, but I don't begrudge her it. Jewel and Vernon are in the river again. From here they do not appear to violate the surface at all. It is as though it had severed them both at a single blow, the 2 torsos moving with infinitesimal and ludicrous care upon the surface. It looks peaceful, like machinery does after you've watched it and listened to it for a long time, as though the clotting, which is you, had dissolved into the myriad original motion, and seeing and hearing in themselves blind and deaf, fury in itself quiet with stagnation. Squatting, Dewey Dell's wet dress shapes for the dead eyes of three blind men those mammalian ludicrosities, which are the horizons and the valleys of the earth. Was that strictly necessary? Like, come on, Faulkner. I know you're all about the human condition here. But was that strictly necessary? All right, now we got just a quick line from Cash, who is rather worse for wear. And if anybody has some I told you so's that he can give out, it's Cash. Wasn't on a bounce. I told them if they wanted it to tote and ride on a bounce, they would have to. Okay. Next up, we've got Cora. I think Cora was Vernon's wife. One day we were talking. She had never been pure religious, not even after that summer at the camp meeting with Brother Whitfield wrestled with her spirit, singled her out, and strove with the vanity in her mortal heart. And I said to her many a time, God gave you children to comfort your hard human lot, and for a token of his own suffering and love, for in love you conceived and bore them. I said that because she took God's love and her duty to him too much as a matter of course, and such conduct is not pleasing to him, I said, he gave us the gift to raise our voices in his undying praise. Because I said there is more rejoicing in heaven over one sinner than over 100 that never sinned. And she said, my daily life is an acknowledgement, an expiation of my sin. And I said, who are you to say that what is sin and what is not sin? It is the Lord's part to judge, ours to praise his mercy and his holy name in the hearing of our fellow mortals. Because he alone can see into the heart, and just because a woman's life is right in the sight of man, she can't know if there is no sin in her heart without the openness her heart to the Lord and receives his grace. I said, just because you've been a faithful wife is no sign that there is no sin in your heart, and just because your life is hard is no sign that the Lord's grace is absolving you. She said, I know my own sin. I know that I deserve my punishment. I do not begrudge it. And I said, it is out of your vanity that you would judge sin and salvation in the Lord's place. It is our mortal lot to suffer, and to raise our voices in praise of him who judges the sin and offers the salvation through our trials and tribulation, time out of mind. Amen. Not even after Brother Whitfield, a godly man, if ever one breathed God's breath, prayed for you and strove as never a man could except him. I said, because it is not us that can judge our sins or know what is sin in the Lord's eyes. She has had a hard life, but so does every woman. But you don't think, from the way she talked, that she knew more about sin and salvation than the Lord God himself, than them who have strove and labored with the sin in this human world. When the only sin she ever committed was being partial to Jewel that never loved her, and was its own punishment, in preference to Dar that was touched by God himself and considered queer by us mortals, and that did love her. I said, there is your sin, and your punishment too. Jewel is your punishment, and where is your salvation? And life is short enough, I said, to win eternal grace in. And God is a jealous God. It is his to judge and to meet, not yours. I know, she said. Then she stopped, and I said, no, what? Nothing, she said. He is my cross, and he will be my salvation. He will save me from the water and from the fire. Even though I have laid down my life, he will save me. How do you know without you open your heart to him and lift your voice in his praise? I said. Then I realized that she did not mean God. I realized that out of the vanity of her heart she had spoken sacrilege. And I went down on my knees right there. I begged her to kneel and open her heart and cast from it the devil of vanity, and cast herself upon the mercy of the Lord. But she wouldn't. She just sat there, lost in her vanity and her pride. They had closed her heart to God and set that selfish mortal boy in his place. Kneeling there, I prayed for her. I prayed for that poor blind woman as I had never prayed for me and mine. All right, so the neighbors aren't all quite on the up and up. This is every bit the southern rural American vibe of the neighbor's wife is definitely a holier than thou sort. I think we've all experienced a lot of that. All right, let's try and get through one more chapter or so, and then we'll take a short break. So, Addie. Which one was Addie again? I don't remember. Because Ants is dead. We'll figure it out. In the afternoon, when school was out and the last one had left with his dirty little snuffling nose, instead of going home, I would go down the hill to the spring where I could be quiet and hate them. I would be quiet there then. Then, with the water bubbling up and away and the sun slanting quiet in the trees and the quiet smelling of damp and rotting leaves and new earth, especially in the early spring, for it was worst then. I could just remember how my father used to say that the reason for living was to get ready to stay dead a long time. And when I would have to look at them day after day, each with his and her secret and selfish thought, and blood strange to each other, blood and strange to mine, and think that this seemed to be the only way I could get ready to stay dead, I would hate my father for having ever planted me. I would look forward to the time when they faltered, so I could whip them. When the switch fell, I could feel it upon my flesh. When it welted and ridged, it was my blood that ran. And I would think that with each blow of the switch, now you are aware of me. Now I am something in your secret and selfish life who have marked your blood with my own forever and ever. And so I took Ants. I saw him pass the schoolhouse 3 or 4 times before I learned that he was driving 4 miles out of his way to do it. I noticed then how he was beginning to hump. A tall man and young, so that he looked already like a tall bird hunched in the cold weather on the wagon seat. He would pass the schoolhouse, the wagon creaking slow, his head turning slow to watch the door of the schoolhouse as the wagon passed, until he went on around the curve and out of sight. One day, I went to the door and stood there when he passed. When he saw me, he looked quickly away and did not look back again. In the early spring, it was worst. Sometimes I thought that I could not bear it, lying in bed at night, with the wild geese going north and their honking coming faint and high and wild out of the wild darkness, and during the day it would seem as though I couldn't wait for the last one to go. Oh, Addie was the wife. Duh. Yeah, we'll still keep it in this neutral voice. She's dead after all. And so when I looked up that day and saw Ants standing there in his Sunday clothes, turning his hat round and round in his hands, I said, "If you got any women folks, why in the world don't they make you get your hair cut?" I ain't got none, he said. Then he suddenly, driving his eyes at me like 2 hounds in a strange yard, "That's what I come to see you about." "And make you hold your shoulders up," I said. "You haven't got any, but you've got a house. They tell me you got a house and a good farm, and you live there alone. Doing it for yourself, do you?" He just looked at me, turning the hat in his hands. "A new house," I said. "Are you going to get married?" And he said again, holding his eyes to mine, "That's, what I came to see you about." Well, this is a glimpse back in time. Here's what this is. Later, he told me I ain't got no people, so that won't be no worry to you. I don't reckon you can say the same. No, I have people. In Jefferson. His face fell a little. Well, I got a little property. I'm poor-handed. I got a good, honest name. I know how town folks are, but maybe when they talk to me, they might listen, I said, but they'll be hard to talk to. He was watching my face. They're in the cemetery. But you live in kin, he said. They'll be different. Will they? I said. I don't know. I never had any other kind. So I took aunts. And when I knew that I had cash, I knew that living was terrible, and that this was the answer to it. That was when I learned that words are no good. That words don't ever fit even what they are trying to say at. When he was born, I knew that motherhood was invented by someone who had to have a word for it, because the ones that had the children didn't care whether there was a word for it or not. I knew that fear was invented by someone that had never had the fear. Pride, who had never had the pride. I knew that it had been not that they had dirty noses, but that we had to use one another by words like spiders dangling by their mouths from a beam, swinging, twisting, and never touching. And they only through the blows of the switch could my blood and their blood flow as one stream. I knew that it had been not that my aloneness had to be violated over and over each day, but that it had never been violated until cash came. Not even by ants in the nights. He had a word too. Love, he called it. But I had been used to words for a long time. I knew that word was like the others, just a shape to fill a lack. That when the right time came, you wouldn't need a word for that any more than for pride or fear. Cash did not need to say it to me, nor I to him. And I would say, let ants use it, if he wants to, so that it was ants or love or ants. It didn't matter. I would think that even while I lay with him in the dark, and Cash asleep in the cradle within the swing of my hand, I would think that if he would wake and cry, I would suckle him too. Ants or love, it didn't matter. My aloneness had been violated, and then made whole again by the violation. Time, ants, love, what you will, outside the circle. Then I found that I had Darl. At first I would not believe it. Then I believed that I would kill ants. It was as though he had tricked me, hidden within a word like within a paper screen, and struck me in the back through it. But then I realized that I had been tricked by words older than ants or love, and that the same word had tricked ants too, and that my revenge would be that he would never know I was taking revenge. And when Darl was born, I asked ants to promise to take me back to Jefferson when I died, because I knew that father had been right, even when he couldn't have known he was right by any more than I could have known I was wrong. Nonsense, Aunt said. You and me ain't nigh done chapping yet, with just two. He did not know that he was dead then. Sometimes I would lie by him in the dark, here in the land that was now of my blood and flesh, and I would think, ants. Why ants? Why are you ants? I would think about his name until after a while I could see the word as a shape, a vessel, and I would watch him liquefy and flow into it like cold molasses, flowing out of the darkness into the vessel, until the jar stood full and motionless, a significant shape profoundly without life, like an empty door frame. Then I would find that I'd forgotten the name of the jar. I would think the shape of my body where I used to be a virgin is in the shape of a yeah, and I couldn't think ants, couldn't remember ants. It was not that I could think of myself as no longer unvirgin, because I was 3 now, and when I would think Cash and Darl that way until their names would die and solidify into a shape and then fade away, I would say, all right, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they call them. And so when Cora Tull would tell me I was not a true mother, I would think how words go straight up in a thin line, quick and harmless, and how terribly doing goes along the earth, clinging to it, so that after a while the two lines are too far apart for the same person to straddle from one to the other, and that sin and love and fear are just sounds that people who've never sinned nor loved nor feared have, for what they've never had and cannot have until they forget the words, like Cora who could never even cook. She would tell me what I owed to my children, and to aunts, and to God. I gave aunts the children. I did not ask for them. I did not even ask him for what he could have given me, not aunts. That was my duty to him, to not ask that. And that duty I fulfilled. I would be I. I would let him be the shape and echo of his word. That was more than he asked, because he could not have asked for that and been aunts, using himself so with a word. And then he died. He did not know he was dead. I would lie by him in the dark, here in the dark land, talking of God's love and his beauty and his sin, here in the dark voicelessness in which the words are the deeds, and the other words that are not deeds, that are just the gaps in people's lacks, coming down like the cries of the geese out of the wild darkness in the old terrible nights, fumbling at the deeds like orphans, to whom are pointed out in a crowd 2 faces and told, that is your father, that is your mother. I believed that I had found it. I believed that the reason was the duty to be alive. To the terrible blood, the red bitter flood boiling through the land, I would think of sin, as I would think of the clothes we both wore in the world's face, of the circumspection necessary, because he was he and I was I, the sin the more utter and terrible, since he was the instrument ordained by God who created the sin to sanctify that sin he had created. While I waited for him in the woods, waiting for him before he saw me, I would think of him as dressed in sin. I would think of him as thinking of me as dressed also in sin. He the more beautiful, since the garment which he had exchanged for sin was sanctified. I would think of the sin as garments, which he would remove in order to shape and coerce the terrible blood to the forlorn echo of the dead word high in the air. Then I would lay with aunts again. I did not lie to him. I just refused. Just as I refused my breast to Cash and Darl after their time was up, here in the dark land talking the voiceless speech. I hid nothing. I tried to deceive no one. I would not have cared. I merely took the precautions that he thought necessary for his sake, not for my safety. But just as I wore clothes in the world's face, and I would think then, when Cora talked to me of how the high dead words in time seemed to lose even the significance of their dead sound, then it was over. Over in the sense that he was gone, and I knew that. See him again, though I would never again see him coming swift and secret to me in the woods, dressed in sin like a gallant garment, already blowing aside with the speed of his secret coming. But for me, it was not over. I mean, over in the sense of beginning and ending, because to me, there was no beginning nor ending to anything then. I even held Aunt's refraining still, not that I was holding him recessional, but as though nothing else had ever been. My children were me alone, of the wild blood boiling along the earth, of me and of all that lived, of none and of all. Then I found that I had Jewel. When I waked to remember to discover it, he was 2 months gone. My father said that the reason for living is getting ready to stay dead. I knew at last what he meant, and that he could not have known what he meant himself, because a man cannot know anything about cleaning up the house afterward. And so I cleaned up my house. With Jewel, I lay by the lamp, holding up my own head, watching him cap and suture it before he breathed. The wild blood boiled away, and the sound of it ceased. Then there was only the milk, warm and calm, and I lying calm in the slow silence, getting ready to clean my house. I gave Aunt Stewie Dale to negative Jewel. Then I gave him Vardaman to replace the child I had robbed him of. And now he has 3 children that are his, and not mine. And then I could get ready to die. One day I was talking to Cora. She prayed for me because she believed I was blind to sin, wanting me to kneel and pray too. Because people to whom sin is just a matter of words, to them, salvation is just words too. Well, all right, so this is all a little bit of a shift in perspective and all, since we just got over with the debacle of the river crossing. And as Addie's coffin is presumably lost, and Cash may or may not be all right. Probably sounds like he's got a broken leg. It's a little bit of a shift, and we're getting Addie's perspective as she's going on and explaining that she does not have a whole lot of love in her life for the family. And I don't really blame her, because the family is all kind of awful. But it's a cyclical event there. She is awful to them. They are awful to everyone. And it just sort of gives a nice old feedback loop there. Well. All right, let's go ahead and take a few minutes now to stretch our legs, top up our drinks, and we'll be back in just a little while. And we'll see whether or not we'll find extra things to dislike about this family. Or, as we see with the next chapter, whether the local preacher will be every bit as hateful as everyone else. Very well could be. All right, be back in just a little bit. All right, we are back. Let me switch back here. I don't know that I can hear my BGM. It may just be in a quiet point. Oh, yep, there it is. All right, cool. My headphones are a little on the quiet side right now. I don't know what the deal is. All right, so things have generally been rather awful for this family here. We've got the event that we just saw, the failed crossing of the river. If we ever learn... Well, let's see. I think this song that we're running as BGM has just a very quiet portion. Yeah, I might need to adjust the levels for this one in particular. Let's tweak that. I keep minus 35 for most of our songs. Let's do minus 30 here. A little bit more of a bop beat there. This is a quiet song. I can adjust it song by song anyway. So, but yeah, so things have been rather bad for this family. They've presumably lost their mother's body, their coffin. The forging has gone very poorly. The mules were killed off in that. The cache is presumably another broken leg. Hopefully that's the worst of the lot. But you don't really... Things can get bad when you're dealing with partial drownings. It happens. And then the others, obviously, there's going to be guilt and trauma all around. And now we saw a glimpse behind the curtain of their poor mother's long, long suffering, where her own father said the whole point of living is to make sure you can stay dead a good long time. And if that is not a dark way to look at life, I have never heard one. But things are different out in when you're poor and out in the sticks, I guess. You just suffer on. So, let's jump back in where we left off. And this is with Whitfield, the preacher man. When they told me she was dying, all that night I wrestled with Satan, and I emerged victorious. I woke to the enormity of my sin. I saw the true light at last, and I fell on my knees and confessed to God and asked his guidance and received it. Rise, he said, repair to that home in which you have put a living lie among those people with whom you are outraged. My word, confess your sin aloud. It is for them, for that deceived husband to forgive you, not I. So I went. I heard that Toll's Bridge was gone. I said, thanks, O Lord, almighty ruler of all, for by those dangers and difficulties which I should have to surmount, I saw that he had not abandoned me, that my reception again into his holy peace and love would be the sweeter for it. Just let me not perish before I have begged the forgiveness of the man who I betrayed. I prayed. Let me not be too late. Let not the tale of mine and her transgression come from her lips instead of mine. She had sworn then that she would never tell it, but eternity is a fearsome thing to face. Have I not wrestled thigh to thigh with Satan myself? Let me not have also the sin of her broken vow upon my soul. Let not the waters of thy mighty wrath encompass me until I have cleansed my soul in the presence of them whom I injured. Excuse me. Piecing things together, I do believe there is a very good chance that Jewel is not Ans's. Just from the way things are looking here. Or Vardaman, but probably Jewel. It was his hand that bore me safely above the flood, that fended me from the dangers of the waters. My horse was frightened, and my own heart failed me as the logs and the uprooted trees bore down upon my littleness. But not my soul. Time after time I saw them averted at destruction's final instant, and I lifted my voice above the noise of the flood. Praise to thee, O mighty Lord and King! By this token shall I cleanse my soul, and gain again into the fold of thy undying love. I knew then that forgiveness was mine. The flood, the danger behind, and as I rode on across the firm earth again, and the scene of my Gethsemane drew closer and closer, I framed the words which I should use. I would enter the house. I would stop her before she had spoken. I would say to her husband, Ants, I have sinned. Do with me as you will. It was already as though it were done. My soul felt freer, quieter than it had in years. Already I seemed to dwell in abiding peace again. As I rode on, to either side I saw his hand. In my heart I could hear his voice. Courage, I am with thee. When I reached Tull's house, his youngest girl came out and called to me as I was passing. She told me that she was already dead. I have sinned, O Lord. Thou knowest the extent of my remorse and the will of my spirit, but he is merciful. He will accept the will for the deed. Who knew that when I framed the words of my confession, it was to Ants I spoke them, even though he was not there? It was he, in his infinite wisdom, that restrained the tale from her dying lips as she lay surrounded by those who loved and trusted her. Mine, the travail by water, which I sustained by the strength of his hand, praise to thee in thy bounteous and omnipotent love, O praise. I entered the house of bereavement, the lowly dwelling where another erring mortal lay while her soul faced the awful and irrevocable judgment. Peace to her ashes. God's grace upon this house, I said. Okay, Faulkner, leave it to make the preacher man just about the worst out of all of them. I appreciate you, Faulkner. I appreciate you. All right. Getting back to a more level perspective with Darl. On the horse, he rode up to Armstead's and came back on the horse, leading Armstead's team. We hitched up and laid Cash on top of Addie. Oh, so they found Addie. Good. Of course, now he's laying on top of a rotting corpse that is waterlogged as well. That has to be a splendid ride. When we laid him down, he vomited again, but he got his head over the wagon bed in time. He's taking a lick in his stomach, too, Vernon said. The horse may have kicked him in the stomach, too, I said. Did he kick you in the stomach, Cash? He tried to say something. Dewey Dell wiped his mouth again. What does he say? What is it, Cash? Dewey Dell said. She leaned down. His tools, she said. Vernon got them out and put them into the wagon. Dewey Dell lifted Cash's head so he could see. We drove on, Dewey Dell and I sitting beside Cash to steady him, and he riding on ahead on the horse. Vernon stood watching us for a while. Then he turned and went back toward the bridge. He walked gingerly, beginning to flap the wet sleeves of his shirt as though he had just got wet. He was sitting the horse before the gate. Armstead was waiting at the gate. We stopped, and he got down, and we lifted Cash down and carried him into the house, where Mrs. Armstead had the bed ready. We left her and Dewey Dell undressing him. We followed Pa out to the wagon. He went back and got into the wagon and drove on, we following on foot into the lot. The wedding had helped, because Armstead said, "You're welcome to the house. You can put it there." He followed, leading the horse, and stood beside the wagon, the reins in his hand. "I thank you," Pa said. We'll use it in the shed yonder. I know it's an imposition on you." "You're welcome to the house," Armstead said. He had that wooden look in his face again, that bold, surly, high-colored, rigid look like his face and eyes were two colors of wood, the wrong one pale and the wrong one dark. His shirt was beginning to dry, but it still clung close upon him when he moved. "She would appreciate it," Pa said. He We took the team out and rolled the wagon back under the shed. One side of the shed was open. "It won't rain under," Armstead said, "but if you'd rather..." Back of the barn were some rusted sheets of tin roofing. We took 2 of them and propped them against the open side. "You're welcome to the house," Armstead said. "Ah, thank you," Pa said. "I'd take it right kind if you'd give them a little snack." "Sho," Armstead said. "Lulu'll have supper ready as soon as she gets Cash comfortable." He had gone back to the horse, and he was taking the saddle off, his damp shirt lapping flat to him when he moved. Pa wouldn't come in the house. "Come in and eat," Armstead said. "It's not ready." "I wouldn't crave nothing," Pa said. "I thank you." "You come in and dry and eat," Armstead said. "It'll be all right here." "It's for her," Pa said. "It's for her sake I'm taking the food. I got no team, no nothing, but she will be grateful to every one of you." "Sho," Armstead said. "You folks come in and dry." But after Armstead gave Pa a drink, he felt better. And when we went in to see about Cash, he hadn't come in with us. When I looked back, he was leading the horse into the barn. He was already talking about getting another team, and by supper time he had good as bought it. He's down there in the barn, sliding fluidly past the gaudy, lunging swirl into the stall with it. He climbs onto the manger and drags the hay down and leaves the stall and seeks and finds the currycomb. Then he returns and slips quickly past the single crashing thump and up against the horse, where it cannot overreach. He applies the currycomb, holding himself within the horse's striking radius, with the agility of an acrobat, cursing the horse in a whisper of obscene caress. Its head flashes back, tooth cropped. Its eyes roll in the dust like marbles on a gaudy velvet cloth as he strikes it upon the face with the back of the currycomb. Okay, Darl seems to have something against Jewel here, by never once mentioning him by name, and whoo boy, there is some passive aggression going on here. Armstead. By the time I give him another sup of whiskey, and supper was about ready. He had done already bought a team from somebody on a credit, picking and choosing he were by then, saying how he didn't like this span and wouldn't put his money in nothing so-and-so owned, not even a hen coop. "You might try Snopes," I said. "He's got 3-4 span. Maybe one of them would suit you." Then he began to mumble his mouth, looking at me like it was me that owned the only span of mules in the country and wouldn't sell them to him. I knew that, like as not, it would be my team that would ever get them out of the lot at all. Only, I don't know what they would do with them if they had a team. Little John had told me that the levee through Haley Bottom had gone for 2 miles, and that the only way to get to Jefferson would be to go around by Motson. But that was Anson's business. "He's a close man to trade with," he says, mumbling his mouth. But when I give him another sup after supper, he cheered up some. He was aiming to go back to the barn and set up with her. Maybe he thought that if he just stayed down there ready to take out, Santa Claus would maybe bring him a span of mules. I like this guy. "But I reckon I can talk him around." He says, "A man will help a fellow in for tight, if he's got ever a drop of Christian blood in him." "Of course, you're welcome to use mine," I said, me knowing how much he believed that was the reason. "I thank you," he said. "She want to go on ourn." And him knowing how much I believed that was the reason. After supper, Jewel rode over to the bend to get Peabody. I heard he was to be there today at Farner's. Jewel came back about midnight. Peabody had gone down below Averness somewhere, but Uncle Billy came back with him, with his satchel of horse physic. Like he says, a man ain't so different from a horse or a mule. Come long, come short, except a mule or a horse has got a little bit more sense. "What you been into now, boy?" he says, looking at Cash. "Give me a mattress and a chair and a glass of whiskey," he says. He made Cash drink the whiskey. Then he run Ants out of the room. Like he was the same leg he broke last summer, Ant says. It's mournful, mumbling, blinking. There's something. This sort of has the same issue of not knowing who's speaking with any given set of quotes. And sometimes it's multiple in the same set of same paragraph break. Reminds me when we were reading Lamort to Arthur. It's like, yeah, there's dialogue. Lord knows who's talking at what time. Or you'll find out about halfway through the speech. We folded the mattress across Cash's legs and set the chair on the mattress, and me and Jewel sat on the chair, and the gal held the lamp, and Uncle Billy taking a chew of tobacco and went to work. Cash fought pretty hard for a while, till he fainted. And then he laid still, with big balls of sweat standing on his face like they had started to roll down, and then stopped to wait for him. When he waked up, Uncle Billy had done packed up and left. He kept on trying to say something until the gal leaned down and wiped his mouth. "It's his tools," she said. "I brought him in, Darl," and said, "I got him." He tried to talk again. She leaned down. "He wants to see him," she said. So Darl brought them in, where he could see him. They showed them under the side of the bed, where he could reach his hand and touch them and see when he felt better. Next morning, Aunt's taken that horse and rode over to the bend to see Snopes. Him and Jewel stood in the lot talking a while. Then Aunt's got on the horse and rode off. I reckon that was the first time Jewel ever let anybody ride that horse. And until Aunt's come back, he hung around in that swole-up way, watching the road like he was half a mind to take out after Aunt's and get the horse back. Along toward 9 o'clock, it begun to get hot. That was when I see the first buzzard. Because of the wetting, I reckon. Anyway, it wasn't until well into the day that I see them. Lucky the breeze was setting away from the house, so it wasn't until well into the morning. But soon as I see them, it was like I could smell it in the field a mile away from just watching them, and them circling and circling for everybody in the county to see what was in my barn. I was still a good half mile from the house when I heard that boy yelling. Well, maybe he might have fell into the well or something. So I whipped up and come into the lot on the lope. There must have been a dozen of them sitting along on the ridgepole of the barn, and that boy was chasing another one around the lot like it was a turkey. It was just lifting enough to dodge him and go flopping back to the roof of the shed again, where he had found it, sitting on the coffin. It had got hot then, right? And the breeze had dropped or changed or something. So I went and found Jewel, but Lula come out. "You got to do something," she said. "It's an outrage." "That's what I aim to do," I said. "It's an outrage," she said. "He should be allowed for treating her so." "He's getting her into the ground the best he can," I said. So I found Jewel and asked him if he didn't want to take out one of the mules and go over to the bend to see about ants. He didn't say nothing. He just looked at me with his jaws going bone white and them bone white eyes of his'n, and he went and begun to call Darl. "What you fixing to do?" I said. He didn't answer. Darl come out. "Come on," Jewel said. "What do you aim to do?" Darl said. "Going to move the wagon," Jewel said over her shoulder. "Don't be a fool," I said. "I never meant nothing. You couldn't help it." And Darl hung back, too. But nothing wouldn't suit Jewel. "Shut your goddamn mouth," he says. "It's got to be somewhere," Darl said. "We'll take the takeout as soon as Pa gets back." "You won't help me?" Jewel says, them white eyes of his and kind of blaring, his face shaking like he had an auger. "No," Darl said. "I won't. Wait till Pa gets back." So I stood in the door and watched him push and haul at that wagon. It was on a downhill, and once I thought he was fixing to beat out the back end of the shed. Then the dinner bell rung. I called him, but he didn't look round. "Gone to dinner," I said. "Tell that boy." But he didn't answer. So I went on to dinner. The gal went down to get the boy, but she never came back. She came back without him. About half through dinner, we heard him yelling again, running that buzzard out. We got a bit of a break here. Hang on. YouTube. All right. I think we're all right. Maybe. Not buffering. So I think we're, oh, well, maybe. Hang on. Dropping again. Dagnabbit. All right, I think we're done dropping frames. For now, anyway. We'll see if it stays stable. All right, yep, I think we're all right. All right, now where were we? Okay. It's an outrage, Lula said. An outrage. He's doing the best he can, I said. A fellow don't trade with Snopes in 30 minutes. They'll sit in the shade all afternoon to dicker. Do, she says, do. He's done too much already. And I reckon he had. Trouble is, his quitting was just about to start out doing. He couldn't buy no team from nobody, let alone Snopes, without he had something to mortgage. He didn't know he would mortgage it. And so, when I went back to the field, I looked at my mules and same as told them goodbye for a spell. And when I come back that evening and the sun's shining all day on that shed, I wasn't so sure I would regret it. So come riding up just as I went out to the porch where they all was. He looked kind of funny. Kind of more hangdog than common. And kind of proud too. Like he had done something he thought was cute. It wasn't so sure now how other folks would take it. I got a team, he said. You bought a team from Snopes, I said. I reckon Snopes ain't the only man in this country that can drive a trade, he said. Sure, I said. He was looking at Jewel with that funny look. But Jewel had done got down from the porch and was going toward the horse. To see what Ants had done to it, I reckon. Jewel, Ant says. Jewel looked back. Come here, Jewel says. Ant says. Jewel come back a little and stopped again. What do you want? So you can got a team from Snopes, I said. He'll send them over tonight, I reckon. You'll want an early start tomorrow, long as you'll have to go by Motson. Then he quit looking like he had been for a while. He got that badgered look, like he used to have, mumbling his mouth. I do the best I can, he said. Oh God, if there was e'er a man in the living world suffered the trials and floutings I suffered. A fellow that just beat Snopes in a trade ought to feel pretty good, I said. What did you give him, Ants? He didn't look at me. I gave a chattel mortgage on my cultivator and cedar, he said. They ain't worth $40. How far do you aim to get with a $40 team? They were all watching him now, quiet and steady. Jewel was stopped, halfway back, waiting to go on to the horse. I give other things, Ant said. He'd begun to mumble his mouth again, standing there like he was waiting for somebody to hit him, and him with his mind already made up not to do anything about it. What other things? Darrell said. Hell, I said. You take my team. You can bring them back. I'll get along some way. So that's what you were doing in Cash's clothes last night, Darrell said. He said it like he was reading it out in the paper, like he never gave a darn himself one way or the other. Jewel had come back now, standing there, looking at Ants with them marble eyes of his'n. Cash aimed to buy that talking machine from Surratt with the money, Darrell said. Ants stood there, mumbling his mouth. Jewel watched him. He ain't never blinked yet. But that's just $8 more, Darrell said, in that voice like he was listening and never gave a darn himself. That still won't buy a team. Ants looked at Jewel quick, kind of sliding his eyes that way. Then he looked down again. God knows, if there were e'er a man, he says. Still, that didn't say nothing. They just watched him, waiting, and him sliding his eyes toward their feet and up their legs, but no higher. And the horse, he says. What horse? Jewel said. Ants just stood there. I'd be darned if a man can't keep the upper hand of his sons. He ought to run them away from home, no matter how big they are. And if he can't do that, I'd be darned if he oughtn't to leave himself. I'd be darned if I wouldn't. You mean you tried to swap my horse? Jewel says. Ant stands there, dangle-armed. For 15 years, I ain't had a tooth in my head, he says. God knows it. He knows in 15 years I ain't ate the victuals he aimed for man to eat to keep his strength up. And me saving a nickel here and a nickel there so my family wouldn't suffer it. To buy them teeth so I could eat God's appointed food. I give that money. I thought that if I could do without eating, my sons could do without riding. God knows I did. Jewel stands with his hands on his hips, looking at ants. Then he looks away. He looked down across the field, his face still as a rock. Like it was somebody else's fault, talking about somebody else's horse, and him not even listening. And he spit, slow, and said, "Hell!" I turned and went on to the gate, and unhitched the horse and got on it. It was moving when he came into the saddle. By the time he was on it, they was tearing down the road like the law might have been behind them. They went out of sight that way, the two of them looking like some kind of spotted cyclone. "Well," I says, "you take my team," I said, but he wouldn't do it, and they wouldn't even stay. And that boy chasing them buzzards all day in the hot sun until he was nigh as crazy as the rest of them. "Leave Cash here anyway," I said, but they wouldn't do that. They made a pallet for him with the quilts on top of the coffin, and laid him down on it and set his tools by him. We put my team in and hauled the wagon about a mile down the road. "If we'll bother you here," Aunt says, "just say so." "Sure," I said. "It'll be fine here. Safe, too. Now, let's go back and eat supper." "I thank you," Aunt said. "We got a little something in the basket. We can make out." "Where'd you get it?" I said. "We brought it from home." "But it'll be stale now," I said. "Come and get some hot victuals." But they wouldn't come. "I reckon we can make out," Aunt said. So I went back home and ate, taking a basket back to them and tried again to make them come back to the house. "I thank you," he said. "I reckon we can make out." So I left them there, squatting around a little fire, waiting. God knows what for. I come on home. I kept thinking about them there, and about that fellow tearing away on that horse. And that would be the last they would see of him. And I'd be darned if I could blame him, not for wanting to not give up his horse, but for getting shut to such a darn fool as Ants. Oh, that's what I thought then. Because be darned if there wasn't something about a darn fellow like Ants that makes it seem a man to have to help him, even when he knows he'll be wanting to kick himself the next minute. It's about an hour after breakfast next morning, Eustace Grimm, that works Snopes' place, came up with a span of mules, hunting ants. "I thought him and Ants never traded," I said. "Sure," Eustace said. "All they liked was the horse. Like I said to Mr. Snopes, he was letting this team go for $50, because if his Uncle Sam had just kept them Texas horses when he owned them, Ants wouldn't have never." "The horse?" I said. "Ants' boy taking that horse and cleared out last night. Probably halfway to Texas by now, and Ants, I didn't know who brung it." Eustace said, "I never seen him. I just found the horse in the barn this morning when I went to feed, and I told Mr. Snopes, and he said to bring the team on over here." Well, that'll be the last they'll ever see of him now, sure enough. Come Christmas time, they'll maybe get a postal card from him in Texas, I reckon. And if it hadn't been Jewel, I reckon it'd have been me. I owe him that much myself. I'd be darned if Ants don't conjure a man some way. I'd be darned if he ain't a sight. Yeah, I've just about had it with this family. I swear. Turn around and sell that horse out from under him when he knows that that horse is everything that Jewel wanted in life. Every single bit. And as hard as he worked for it when he was just a boy, this old man's a piece of work. Ooh, in the worst sort of way. All right, let's keep going. We want to try and get to about 75% tonight. And we're close. We're at about 73, so probably about 2 chapters, I'd say. So, yeah, every time you think it can't get worse, Ant styles it up. Like, he is the worst sort of manipulative son of a bitch you ever done that. I've been in the accent too long. Ah, shit. Whenever it starts to slip, it's like, oh no, it's starting to sound a little bit more natural. I don't want this. I don't want this at all. All right. Vardaman. Now there's 7 of them, in little tall black circles. Look, Dar, I say, see? He looks up. We watch them in little tall black circles, not moving. Yesterday there were just 4, I said. There were more than 4 in the barn. Do you know what I would do if he tries to light on the wagon again, I say? What would you do? Dar says. I wouldn't let him light on her, I say. I wouldn't let him light on Cash either. Cash is sick. He is sick on the box, but my mother is a fish. Here we go again. We gotta get some medicine in Matson, Pa says. I reckon we just have to. How do you feel, Cash? Dar says. It don't bother none, Cash says. Do you want it propped up a little higher? Dar says. Cash has a broken leg. He has had 2 broken legs. He lies on the box with a quilt rolled under his head and a piece of wood under his knee. I reckon we ought to left him at Armstead's, Pa says. I have got a broken leg, and Pa hasn't, and Dar hasn't, and it's just a bumps, Cass says. He kind of grinds together a little on a bump. Don't bother none. Jewel's gone away. He and his horse went away once upon a time. It's because she wouldn't have us beholden, Pa says. Oh, God, I do the best that e'er man. It's because Jewel's mother is a horse, Darl, I said. Maybe I can draw the ropes a little tighter, Darl says. That's why Jewel and I were both in the shed, and she was in the wagon because the horse lives in the barn, and I had to keep on running the bustard away from. If you just would, Cash says. And Dewey Dale has got a broken leg, and I haven't. Cash is my brother. We stop. When Darl loosens the rope, Cash begins to sweat again. His teeth look out. Hurt? Darl says. I reckon you better put it back, Carl says. Darl puts the rope back, pulling hard. Cash's teeth look out. Hurt? Darl says. It don't bother none, Cash says. You want Pa to drive slower? Darl says. Nope, Cash says. Ain't no time to hang back. It don't bother none. We'll have to get some medicine at Monson, Pa says. I reckon we'll have to. Tell him go on, Cash says. We go on. Dewey Dell leans back and wipes Cash's face. Cash is my brother, but Jewel's mother is a horse. My mother's a fish. Darl says that when we come to the water again, I might see her. And Dewey Dell said she's in the box. How could she have got out? She got out through the holes I bored. Into the water, I said. And when we come into the water again, I'm going to see her. My mother is not in the box. My mother does not smell like that. My mother's a fish. Those cakes will be in fine shape by the time we get to Jefferson, Darl says. Dewey Dell does not look around. You better try to sell them in Matson, Darl says. When will we get to Matson, Darl? I say. Tomorrow, Darl says, if this team don't tack to pieces. Snows must have fed them on sawdust. Why did he feed them on sawdust, Darl? I say. Look, Darl says. See? Now there are 9 of them. Tall in little black circles. When we come to the foot of the hill, Pa stops, and Darl and Dewey Dell and I get out. Cash can't walk because he has a broken leg. Come up, mules, Pa says. The mules walk hard. The wagon creaks. Darl and Dewey Dell and I walk behind the wagon, up the hill. When we come to the top of the hill, Pa stops, and we get back into the wagon. Now, there are 10 of them, all in little tall black circles on the sky. Always with the Vardaman chapters. Just little bits of broken in a small package. Mosley, this is a new one. I happened to look up. I saw her outside the window, looking in. Not close to the glass, and not looking at anything in particular. Just standing there with her head turned this way and her eyes full on me and kind of blank, too. like she was waiting for a sign. When I looked up again, she was moving toward the door. She kind of bumbled at the screen door for a minute, like they do, and came in. She had on a stiff-brimmed straw hat setting on the top of her head. She was carrying a package wrapped in newspaper. I thought she had a quarter or a dollar at the most, and that after she stood around a while, she would maybe buy a cheap comb or a bottle of Negro toilet water. So I never disturbed her for a minute or so, except to notice that she was pretty in a kind of sullen, awkward way, that she looked a sight better in her gingham dress and her own complexion than she would after she bought whatever she would finally decide on, or tell that she wanted. I knew that she already decided before she came in, but you have to let them take their time. So I went on with what I was doing, figuring to let Albert wait on her when he caught up at the fountain. When he came back to me. "That woman," he said, "you better see what she wants." "What does she want?" I said. "I don't know. I can't get anything out of her. You better wait on her." So I went around the counter. I saw that she was barefooted, standing with her feet flat and easy on the floor, like she was used to it. She was looking at me, hard, holding the package. I saw she had about as black a pair of eyes as ever I saw. She was a stranger. I never remembered seeing her in Matson before. "What can I do for you?" I said. Still, she didn't say anything. She stared at me without winking. Then she looked back at the folks at the fountain. Then she looked past me toward the back of the store. "Do you want to look at some toilet things?" I said. "Or is it medicine you want?" "That's it," she said. She looked quick back at the fountain again. So I thought maybe her ma or somebody had sent her in for some with this female dope. She was ashamed to ask for it. I knew she couldn't have a complexion like hers and use it herself, let alone not being much more than old enough to barely know what it was for. It's a shame the way they poison themselves with it. But a man's got to stock it or go out of business in this country. "Oh," I said, "what do you use? We have..." She looked at me again, almost like she had said, "Hush," and looked toward the back of the store again. I'd like to go back there," she said. "Well, all right," I said. "You have to humor them. You save time by it." I followed her to the back. She put her hand on the gate. "There's nothing back there but the prescription case," I said. "What do you want?" She stopped and looked at me. It was like she had taken some kind of a lid off her face. Her eyes. It was her eyes. Kind of dumb and hopeful and sullenly willing to be disappointed all at the same time. But she was in trouble of some sort. I could see that. "What's your trouble?" I said. "Tell me what it is you want. I'm pretty busy." I wasn't meaning to hurry her, but a man just hasn't got the time they have out there. It's the female trouble," she said. "Oh," I said, "is that all?" I thought maybe she was younger than she looked, and her first one had scared her. Or maybe one had been a little abnormal, as it will in young women. "Where's your ma?" I said. "Haven't you got one?" "She's out yonder in the wagon," she said. "Why not talk to her about it before you take any medicine?" I said. "Any woman would have told you about it." She looked at me, and I looked at her again and said, "How old are you?" 17, she said. "Oh," I said, "I thought maybe you were..." She was watching me, but then in the eyes, all of them looked like they had no age, and knew everything in the world, anyhow. "Are you too regular, or not regular enough?" She quit looking at me, but she didn't move. "Yes," she said. "I reckon so, yes." "Well, which?" I said. "Don't you know? It's a crime and a shame, but after all, they'll buy it from somebody." She stood there, not looking at me. "You want something to stop it?" I said. "No," she said. "That's it. It's already stopped." "Well, what?" Her face was lowered still, like they do in all their dealings with a man, so she didn't ever know just where the lightning would strike next. "You're not married, are you?" I said. "No." "Oh," I said. "And how long has it been since it stopped?" "About 5 months, maybe." "It ain't been but 2, she said. "Well, I haven't got anything in my store you want to buy." I said, unless it's a nipple. And I'd advise you to buy that and go back home and tell your pa, if you have one, and let him make somebody buy you a wedding license. Was that all you wanted? But she just stood there, not looking at me. I got the money to pay you, she said. Is it your own? Or did he act enough of a man to give you the money? He gave it to me. $10. He said that would be enough. $1,000 wouldn't be enough in my store, and 10 cents wouldn't be enough. I said, you take my advice and go home and tell your pa or your brothers if you have any, or the first man you come to in the road. But she didn't move. Leif said I could get it at the drugstore. He said to tell you, me and him wouldn't never tell nobody you sold it to us. And I just wish your precious Leif had come for it himself. That's what I wish. I don't know. I'd have had a little respect for him then. And you can go back and tell him I said so if he ain't halfway to Texas by now, which I don't doubt. Me, respectable druggist, that's kept store and raised a family and been a church member for 56 years in this town. I'm a good mind to tell your folks myself if I can just find who they are. She looked at me now, her eyes and face kind of blank again, like when I first saw her through the window. I didn't know, she said. He told me I could get something at the drugstore. He said that might not want to sell it to me, but if I had $10 and told him I wouldn't never tell nobody. He never said this drugstore, I said. If he did, or mentioned my name, I'd defy him to prove it. I'd defy him to repeat it, or I'll prosecute him to the full extent of the law, and you can tell him so. But maybe another drugstore would, she said. Then I don't want to know it. Me, that's... Then I looked at her. But it's a hard life they have. Sometimes a man, if there can ever be any excuse for sin, which it can't be, and then life wasn't made to be easy on folks. They wouldn't ever have any reason to be good and die. Look here, I said. You get that notion out of your head. The Lord gave you what you have, even if he did use the devil to do it, and you let him take it away from you if it's his will to do so. You go on back to Leif, and you and him take that $10 and get married with it. Leif said I could get something at the drugstore, she said. Then go and get it, I said. You won't get it here. She went out, carrying the package, her feet making a little hissing on the floor. She bumbled again at the door and went out. I could see her through the glass going on down the street. It was Albert told me about the rest of it. He said the wagon was stopped in front of Grummet's hardware store, with the ladies all scattering up and down the street with handkerchiefs to their noses, and a crowd of hard-nosed men and boys standing around the wagon, listening to the marshal arguing with the man. He was a kind of tall, gaunted man sitting on the wagon, saying it was a public street, and he reckoned he had as much right there as anybody, and the marshal telling him he would have to move on. Folks couldn't stand it. They'd been dead 8 days, Albert said. They came from someplace out in Yoknapatawpwa County, trying to get to Jefferson with it. Must have been like a piece of rotten cheese coming into an anthill. That ramshackle wagon that Albert said folks were scared would fall all to pieces before they could get it out of town. With that homemade box, and another fellow with a broken leg lying on a quilt on top of it, and the father and little boy sitting on the seat, and the marshal trying to make them get out of town. It's a public street, the man says. I reckon we can stop and to buy something the same as every other man. We got the money to pay for it. And it ain't every law that says a man can't spend his money where he wants. They had stopped to buy some cement. The other son was in Grummet's, trying to make Grummet's break a sack and let him have 10 cents worth. And finally, Grummet broke the sack to get him out. They wanted to get the cement to fix the fellow's broken leg some way. Why, you'll kill him, the marshal said. You'll cause him to lose his leg. You take him on to a doctor, and you get this thing buried as soon as you can. Don't you know you're liable to jail for endangering the public health? We're doing the best we can, the father said. Then he told a long tale about how they'd had to wait for the wagon to come back, and how the bridge was washed away, and how they went 8 miles to another bridge and it was gone too, so they came back and swum the ford, and the mules got drowned, and how they got another team and found that the road was washed out, and they had to come clean around by Matson, and then the one with the cement came back and told him to shut up. We'll be gone in a minute, he told the marshal. We ain't never aimed to bother nobody, the father said. You take that fellow to a doctor, the marshal told the one with the cement. I reckon he's all right, he said. It ain't that we're hard-hearted, the marshal said, but I reckon you can tell yourself how it is. Sho, the other said. We'll take out as soon as Dewey Dell comes back. She went to deliver a package. So they stood there with the folks backed off with handkerchiefs to their faces, until, in a minute, the girl came back up with that newspaper package. Come on, the one with the cement said. We lost too much time. So they got in the wagon and went on. And then when I went to supper, it still seemed like I could smell it. And the next day, I met the marshal, and I begun to sniff and said, Smell anything? Oop. Wrong button there. I reckon they're in Jefferson by now, he said. Or in jail. Well, thank the Lord it's not our jail. That's a fact, he said. All right. So, I'm going to set a bookmark here. Come on. So, a little bit of a different perspective, and this was a bit of a surprise in the chapter in how it was playing out. We knew Dewey Dell was up to something. We knew there was something going on behind the scenes there. Had no idea that it was that. And wouldn't you know, in the rural South, in the sticks, in little country towns, it's frowned upon to think of getting an abortion. By any means. That's such a surprise. You'd never know how times change. No, this is the most obvious thing in the world. But it is all out in the open. Yeah, this town is a little something. I understand they don't want some yokels up there stinking up their streets, because Lord knows it's got to stink to high hell. But between the rather rough handling of Dewey Dell there and the rather forced exit pushed upon them by the marshal, it's pretty easy to find reasons to dislike this town. It was Mott or Mollet or something. What was the town's name again? Let me backtrack a little bit. I swear it was around here somewhere. What was that town's name? Matson. Yeah. So, Matson is not the nicest of towns. Understandably. The pharmacist has got some opinions. Now, to be fair, at that time, those opinions were probably adhering to the law. But still. Yeah, exactly. Like, not shocked about this. None of this is a surprise. But we don't need to like it. Anyway, so that gets us to just north of 3/4 of the way through the book. And so we should be able to finish this up pretty neatly tomorrow night. We've kept a little bit late tonight because we wanted to finish that chapter. So let's go ahead and break for now. We'll be back tomorrow for our normal reading at 8 Eastern. And we will see how things will wrap up. We've seen things continue to go from bad to worse, and find new and interesting ways to go to hell. And I have a feeling things will continue to get a little bit darker, a little bit more ironic, and a little bit more... Because sometimes that's the only real reaction, is a hard, heavy sigh. That's Faulkner. We knew what we were getting into when we signed up for this. But still... Alright, as always, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll be back next time, where we will continue our reading of As I Lay Dying. Until then, good night. Bye now.